Take your Bibles and turn to Genesis chapter number 30. We've been going through the book of Genesis on Sunday nights, and we're going to continue here in Genesis chapter number 30. A little bit of background. What's gone on in the past here is Jacob he's tricked his father Isaac, and he tricked him in the birthright, out of the birthright, and out of the blessing. He tricked Esau out of the birthright, and then tricked Jacob into giving him the blessing. And so now he's had to run for his life because his brother Esau is going to kill him. And so Jacob has had to run for his life, and he has gone to his mother's family, to his mother's brother Laban, and he's been working for him for some time here. What it is he agreed to work for Laban for 7 years to marry Laban's daughter Rachel. Well, the trickster got tricked. Jacob got tricked by Laban. Laban wound up giving him Leah, his daughter, to marry instead. So Jacob worked 7 years and then wound up marrying Leah when he thought he was going to marry Rachel. And then Laban said, hey, if you'll work 7 more years for me, I'll give you Rachel too. And so he gives both Leah and Rachel to him in the 7th year of being with him. And so in the next 13 years, Jacob has 12 children, 11 boys and a girl. And we're told about that in the first part of chapter 30. Leah has 4 sons, and it actually begins in the last part of chapter 29. Leah has 4 sons. Leah had Reuben and Simeon and Levi and Judah. Well, then Rachel decides to give her handmaid to Jacob. She's jealous, she's envious, and so Jacob winds up having 2 boys with Bilhah, who is Rachel's handmaid, and Jacob has 2 sons, Dan and Naphtali, with Bilhah. And so now you have 6 sons. It goes on to explain that then Leah responds by giving her handmaid to Jacob, and Jacob has 2 sons by Zilpah. Their names are Gad and Asher. And so now he has 8 boys. We are then told that the Lord gives Leah, 2 more boys and a daughter after that. Issachar and Zebulun are the 2 boys, and then Dinah is the girl. And so Jacob has now had 10 sons and a daughter, and then Rachel gets pregnant and has Joseph. And so he's had 11 boys and a daughter. And if you know the story, there's going to be 12 boys, but now he has 11 boys and a daughter. And that's where we're at. So this is, okay, think about it. It's 12 kids. It's taken at least 13 years. And here in a minute, Jacob, I think we'll get to it in the next message, but Jacob he says to Laban, hey, I've been working for you for 20 years. And so the Bible's absolutely accurate on that. He worked the first 7 years without being married, and then for the past 13, he's been married to 2 women. He's wound up having 11 sons and a daughter, and that's where we're at in Genesis chapter 30, verse number 25. Here we are about 19 to 20 years into this, where he's been with Laban. In verse number 25, we're told, and it came to pass, when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said unto Laban, send me away, that I may go unto mine own place and to my country. And so Jacob says, hey, Laban, I'm ready to leave. He says in verse 26, give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served thee, and let me go. For thou knowest my service which I have done thee. And Laban, this is an interesting response. I preached on this last Sunday night. Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry, for I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake. And let me just say this. When Christians are doing what they're told, when they are serving the Lord, God blesses them, and lost people like Laban can even tell. Laban says, I have learned by experience, I have experienced this, that the Lord hath blessed me over these past 20 years for thy sake, Jacob. Jacob, you're a godly man, a God-fearing man, and God has blessed you, and the blessing that he's blessing you with is spilling over to me. In verse 28, Laban says, and he said, appoint me thy wages, and I will give it. In other words, Laban says, what do you want? What do you want your wages to be? And I'll give it to you. And Jacob said unto him, thou knowest how I have served thee, and how thy cattle was with me. And that's talking about sheep and goats. For it was little which thou hadst before I came, and it is now increased into a multitude. Boy, talk about learning by experience that the Lord has blessed him. And the Lord hath blessed thee since my coming, and now when shall I provide for mine own house also? Verse 31, and Laban said, what shall I give thee? And Jacob said, thou shalt not give me anything. If thou wilt do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep thy flock. I believe he's talking about through one more year. So I believe this is the 19th year here. He says, hey, don't do anything for me, but here's what I want. I will again feed and keep thy flock. In verse 32, I will pass through all thy flock today, removing from thence that flock all the speckled and spotted cattle, again, of the sheep, and all the brown cattle among the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and of such shall be my hire. So shall my righteousness answer for me in time to come, when it shall come for my hire before thy face. Everyone that is not speckled and spotted among the goats, and brown among the sheep, that shall be counted stolen with me. And so in other words, Jacob says, hey, I want these type of sheep, and we'll talk here in a minute about these words, speckled and spotted and brown. Verse 34, and Laban said, behold, I would it might be according to thy word. And he removed that day the he-goats that were ring-straked. Now we've got another word, ring-straked, and spotted, and all the she-goats that were speckled and spotted, and every one that had some white in it, and all the brown among the sheep, and gave them into the hand of his sons. And he set 3 days' journey betwixt himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. And so, I want to just go into this. Let me explain some of the looks here of these sheep and these goats. It mentioned speckled, spotted, brown. Of course, okay, we can imagine what brown means, but ring-straked. These are, we don't use words like ring-straked or speckled much. I mean, we might say spotted, but we don't use a lot of these words much anymore. I was looking them up, and they are different Hebrew words. But I want you to notice here how they're interchangeable. He mentioned how he's going to remove the speckled and spotted sheep and the brown sheep. And he's also going to move the spotted and speckled among the goats in verse 32. So you've got speckled and spotted and brown and then of the sheep, and then you've got speckled and spotted of the goats. And then he says in verse number 35, says, and he removed that day the he-goats that were ring-straked and spotted, and all the she-goats that were speckled and spotted. And so it would appear that ring-straked is another word for speckled. It seems to be being used interchangeably there because it explained that in verse 32. There's some differing thoughts on what these may mean. Speckled seems to mean spotted. Okay, it seems to mean the same as spotted. Spotted means spots. Now, we're not told if that means like a big spots. When we think of spots, we think more of that big around. We think of smaller spots. We think of small, minuscule spots. But maybe whenever it says spots, maybe it's talking about a big spot that's maybe this big around. Maybe a spot like the size of this book on its shoulder, and maybe another spot the size of this book on another shoulder. So maybe that's what was meant by this word spotted. It's hard to tell. But then he also says brown, and even that word, it just means, it has the idea of just being kind of a darker color. So it may have even been black sheep, I don't know, but speckled and spotted and brown, and then ring-straked. And that word seems to mean possibly the same here as speckled, but it could also mean striped. with bands. And so a lot of things. And here in a minute we're going to find out also he got the grizzled. And it appears that the word grizzled means spotted. And so here's my point. Don't get hung up so much on those words. Just, there's a main point that's being made here, and we'll get to that. In verse 37 it says, "And Jacob took him rods of green poplar, and of the hazel and chestnut tree, and peeled white streaks in them, and made the white appear, which was in the rods. And he set the rods which he had peeled before the flocks in the gutters, in the watering troughs, when the flocks came to drink, and that they should conceive when they came to drink. And the flocks conceived before the rods, and brought forth cattle ring-straked, speckled, and spotted. And Jacob did separate the lambs, and set the faces of the flocks toward the ring-straked, and all the brown in the flock of Laban. And he put his own flocks by themselves, and put them not unto Laban's cattle. So he kept them all separated." In verse 41, "And it came to pass, whensoever the stronger cattle did conceive, that Jacob laid the rods before the eyes of the cattle in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the cattle were feeble, he put them not in. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's." And that's the gist of what's going on here. Jacob has these rods, and he's peeled streaks in these rods, and he's putting them before these sheep when they are mating. And when the stronger are mating, he puts these rods in front of them because he's wanting the stronger sheep to belong to him. And when the feeble, when the weak, it's not worth as much, when those are mating, he doesn't put the rods before them because he doesn't want those sheep and goats. It says in verse 43, here's the outcome of what Jacob has done here. "And the man increased exceedingly, and had much cattle, and maidservants, and menservants, and camels, and asses." And so Jacob seems, if we just had this to go on, it would seem that Jacob is up to his tricky ways again. He's tricked his dad in the past, and he got paid back for that by being tricked into a marriage that he didn't want. And so he's up to his tricky ways again. Jacob may be messing up here, and if this is all we had, we might even reach that conclusion. But let's go on here, and it explains more of what's going on in chapter 31. "And Jacob heard the words of Laban's sons, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's." Apparently, this has been a very thorough thing that Jacob has done. A very thorough, underhanded thing that he's done. He's taken away all that was Laban's, and of that which was Laban's hath he gotten all this glory. So Laban's sons are not thrilled with Jacob. They're not happy with Jacob at all. It says in verse 2, "And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before." So now all of a sudden, Laban is not too pleased with Jacob either. It's kind of like Jacob walks in the room and it's just cold. Jacob walks in the room and Laban doesn't have anything nice to say. He doesn't say, there's no hello. There's no, "Hey, how you doing, son-in-law?" Nothing like that. It's just, "Oh, there's that guy." Laban's countenance has fallen. We're going to get into more of that in just a minute. But verse number 3, it says, "And the Lord said unto Jacob, Return," now this is God speaking to Jacob, "Return unto the land of thy fathers, and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee." In verse 4 it says, "And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock, and said unto them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not toward me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me." I don't know what all is going on here, but there may be even some fear, not necessarily fear, but some awareness that Laban could be a dangerous guy. We'll get into more of that in the next message in this series about Laban kind of being a dangerous fellow. But, right here, he's noticing that Laban's countenance, Laban's attitude is not a good one toward him anymore. It isn't toward him as before. And I mean, can you blame Laban? I mean, good grief, he's just been tricked out of all of his sheep. I don't think Laban can put his finger on it. I don't think Laban knows what has happened here, but he feels like he's been tricked. In verse 6, and ye know that with all my power I have served your father. And your father hath deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. Oh, well now that's a game changer. See, we thought Laban, if all we had so far was if we didn't have this verse, we wouldn't know that Laban has actually been doing him wrong. Not just in tricking him in that marriage, but over this whole 20 years, he's changed his wages 10 times. That is an average of once every 2 years, Laban changing his wages. And I guarantee you, he wasn't giving him a raise. He was cutting his wages. Laban is actually getting what he's deserved. Laban, the trickster, is actually being tricked. Laban is a user. Laban is the type of person that uses people. Oh yeah, he'll be your friend, he'll be your buddy, and his countenance will be toward you while you do what he wants you to do. As long as you're getting along with him, as long as you're doing what you're told or doing what he expects of you. But the moment you don't do exactly what he wants you to do, oh, you've crossed a line with Laban. There's a lot of people like that. A lot of people like that. They're fine with you as long as you're doing what they want you to do, as long as you're falling in the line with what they think. Yeah, there's a lot of people like that. There are managers like that. There are people that you go to school with like that. There's coworkers like that. There are some people, you cross them, they will never forgive you for as long as they live. Forgiveness will never come. Sometimes you do something and you're not even crossing them. You're doing fine. You're not doing anything to cross them at all. But you didn't do what they wanted you to do. And so their countenance toward you is going to change, and their countenance is not toward you like it used to be. You got to be very careful with people like that. I tell you, it's not a good thing if those are the types of friends you've got, because you're never going to please them 100% of the time. Honestly, the person like Laban, if this is your friend or your coworker or something like that, you have to basically live to please them. And we shouldn't just willy-nilly try to cross people. But honestly, the only person that we should ever be concerned with trying to please all the time would be God. Everyone else, I've realized this as a pastor, I can't please everybody. I can't. I simply can't, as a pastor, please everyone. Some people are going to think we need one color of carpet in the church, and some people are going to think we need a different color of carpet in the church, and some people are going to think maybe we don't need any carpet in the church. We should just go to tile, I don't know, or maybe a wood look or something like that. Everybody's going to have an opinion. Well, we shouldn't have pews. We should only have chairs in the sanctuary. We should never have fellowships at the fellowship hall. We should never eat at church, or maybe we should eat every Sunday. Everybody's going to have different opinions, and I cannot please everybody. It's impossible. You cannot live your life. There's a very delicate balance taught in the Bible. Very delicate balance. Here it is. You don't want to cause somebody to stumble if you can help it. That's why Paul talked and he said, hey, as much as lieth within you, live peaceably with every man. Get along with everybody that you possibly can. Yeah. Be forgiving and understanding with people. We as Christians, we are to be concerned with not causing other people to stumble, but that's not what's going on here. This is Laban has a preconceived notion of how Jacob should be. This is a crazy father-in-law. This is crazy. Think about this. This is a father-in-law. I'm not much of a hunter. I enjoy hunting. I'm not good at it. I feel like if I practiced at it more, if I had more time, I could spend more time doing it. I could probably get pretty good at it. I enjoy hunting. But, Johnny's dad didn't expect me to necessarily be a top-notch hunter. I've met people that if you don't hunt, then you might as well be nothing to them. I mean, you're nothing. That's not, I'm not going to live to please you in that area. I'm not. I mean, I don't mind trying to learn about hunting and enjoy hunting to build up a relationship with my father-in-law. But that's really just, I'm not going to live to please you in that area. I'm going to live to please God. But there are some people who feel like they should be able to own you. And that's Laban. Oh, you'll really find that out when later on in this chapter, in the next message, it really comes out who Laban really thinks he is. Laban has a God complex. He thinks he's God. He really does. And that goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden, where the devil tricked Eve and he said, "Ye shall be as gods," and Laban is caught up thinking he is a god. That's why he's so concerned with his riches here. And his sons are like, "Hey, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all this glory." And so that has been what has been on Laban and his sons' minds all this time. We're going to get as much stuff as we possibly can. And anybody that crosses us and disagrees with us on that, well, they're our enemy. Even if it's your son-in-law. Even if it's your daughters. I just want to try to give you an understanding of who Laban is. This is who he is. He has a God complex. He thinks he's in charge of everything. He thinks everything belongs to him. It says, let me read verse 7 again. We're going to read down to verse 16 here. We're going to get there. But it says, "And your father," Jacob says to his wives, "and your father hath deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. But God suffered him not to hurt me." Now that tells you a lot about who Laban is. The fact that Jacob knows Laban would hurt him if he could. Tells you a lot about Laban. Jacob is well aware Laban wants to hurt him, but that God won't let him. That's pretty impressive, pretty important, but that's pretty impressive about our God, that God is in control and he's protecting Jacob. In verse 8, Jacob says, "If Laban said thus, the speckled shall be thy wages, then all the cattle bear speckled. And if he said thus, the ring-straked shall be thy hire, then bear all the cattle ring-straked. Thus God, notice this, Jacob says, God hath taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me." So we thought Jacob was maybe tricking Laban. Not really. This is God doing this. It all boils down to this. God is taking away the sheep of Laban and giving them to Jacob. In verse number 10. "And it came to pass at the time that the cattle conceived that I lifted up mine eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ring-straked, speckled, and grizzled." And so Jacob is saying, "Hey, I got a vision of this. God showed me what was going to happen. God showed me what was going to happen. And the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here am I. And the angel said, Lift up now thine eyes and see. All the rams which leap upon the cattle are ring-straked, speckled, and grizzled. For I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee." See, God's been paying attention. All 20 years. God has noticed what this guy's been doing to him for 20 years. Verse number 13. "I am the God of Bethel." And did you catch that? This angel says he is God. Guys, I believe this is Jesus Christ appearing to Jacob. I want you to think about this. It calls him angel of God. Angel, the word angel means messenger. So could Jesus be bringing a message? I don't know. It's something interesting to ponder. It says, "The angel of God," verse 11, "spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And Jacob said, Here am I. And the angel," I believe God here, "said, Lift up now thine eyes and see. All the rams which leap upon the cattle are ring-straked, speckled, and grizzled." Notice this. "For I," if this were just an angel, what would it matter if the angel had seen it? No, what matters is God has seen it. And the angel says, "For I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee." This is Jesus saying, I've seen it all. I've seen everything he's done to you. I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar, and where thou vowest a vow unto me. You remember that? Where Jacob had the pillow of stone that night, and he anointed it as a pillar. Now arise, get thee out from this land, and return unto the land of thy kindred. Jacob is telling his wives about a vision that he's had, and God speaking to him. Now listen to his wives, Laban's daughters' reaction. It says, and Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? They're asking a question. Does Laban have an inheritance for us? Are we not counted of him strangers? Laban treats his own daughters like strangers now. You ever seen that happen in families? Laban is treating his own daughters as strangers. You still think Laban's getting a raw deal? They say, for he hath sold us. They feel like they've been sold. Their daughters, his daughters, feel like they've been sold, and hath quite devoured also our money. Laban has a spending problem, and he doesn't care about the next generation that's coming up. He doesn't care about his daughters or his sons. He doesn't care about all of that. And he has devoured their money.